pretty extraordinary and unusual, an unannounced visit, but one that the First Lady clearly wanted to get out to the world, bringing our Kate Bennett and our camera crew and our live equipment to show her first stop at a detention center in Texas, in McAllen, Texas. She had these discussions, I want to talk about this with our panel, with the federal and local officials who are running this detention center, trying to get information. One thing that was noteworthy is that it sounds like the majority of the children who are there came unaccompanied, about 10%. So there's 60 kids, about 5 or 6 were separated from their families. So that's the experience that she has and she's about to get when she actually tours, which we're not seeing quite yet, although looks like there's a shot of her starting her tour. You know what, let's listen into this.
This will allow them to know what their daily schedule is going to be like. It identifies their wing, also the rules of the facility, and then their daily activities. And this is changed daily, so the children know exactly what they're going to be doing throughout the day. And of course, we have our rules.
They keep it very organized.
They keep up with their rules.
Yeah.
They do their own beds and they do their own cleaning. I mean, we do have assistant housekeeping, but for the most part, children maintain their rooms. And they do a fantastic job. They take ownership while they're here. And a lot of times they'll say, wow, this is my bed. Wow, they've never had a bed for themselves. And absolutely, this is your bed when you're here.
One of our few complaints we get from them is their night stay air conditioning, so they think it's cold in here. Yes, things we don't think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they make us.
This is their flag, their country. So if we can walk on over to another bedroom here, we can walk in.
Here we go now.
Yeah. Right, guys, we're coming this way.
Follow this gentleman here.
Okay, you can see this is Raw Live TV, everybody. We are going with what we're getting down there because this is something that obviously is happening on the fly. You just, I think, heard one of the press officials there saying no cameras. At that point, it looked like that was the time when the First Lady was actually going to go in and interact with the children. But you saw the beginning of her tour, listening to the man who heads that shelter there, explaining what the schedules are for the children during the day, so on and so forth. Let's bring it back around the table just to talk about, first and foremost, the imagery and the import of what we just saw and the fact that the First Lady was and is there.
It is important. It's different. Most of the children were there, as you noted, are not the children that were taken from their parents. They're children that have come unaccompanied across the border. We heard a lot about this actually during the Obama administration, and he received quite a bit of criticism for how he dealt with that crisis a couple of years ago. That said, yes, it's important that she's taking the press through. It's important that she's drawing attention to this. That said, that briefing was a little bit like everything's fine. The kids come in here, they're a little upset, and then they relax, I think is one of the officials there. We've read accounts that is not the case, especially with these young children who come in, do not calm down, are catatonic. There could be permanent damage from what has already occurred to them. So forgive me for looking at this with a little bit of a skeptical eye.
And these are children, if I might just add, since we're just getting information, of the 60 children, the age range is 5 to 17. So this is not the tender age facility that one of them that we've been hearing about and talking so much about. These are kids, presumably, who can communicate, right. Unlike some of the babies who can't and just want to be held by their parents and can't. These are, most of the kids here did cross the border illegally but unaccompanied.
Yeah, and I mean, this was a hand-picked place by the American government to give a certain impression of what these facilities are like. We don't know what these facilities are like. They're all over the country. There's some in New York, there's some in Michigan, apparently there's some in South Carolina, there's some in Texas as well. They're run by different sorts of people. And, you know, I mean, that's what this highlighted to me, again, how little we know and how selective the government has been in giving access. I mean, the press has tried to get access to some of these.
That's an important point.
The press has tried to get access to some of these places, and they've been very sparing in terms of allowing cameras in, and certainly there are privacy issues with these young kids. In some ways, it was hard to hear what they were saying in that exchange, but at some point they seemed to suggest that it could take 45 days for kids to be reunited with their parents, or who, if they're unaccompanied minors. There was one statement that said some children will move on to refugee status. Is that because they were unaccompanied minors and already their families aren't there? Is that because their parents have been deported back and there's nowhere to place them? So, I mean, I'm not sure this is going to be the feel-good story and the sort of compassionate take on this that the White House hopes it will be.
I think they were obviously going for that. They want to show this is a place that's got a lot of programs, is well run. These are obviously people who care about what they do. But at the same time, it reinforces the whole idea these kids have been taken from their families and they might get a phone call, be able to make a phone call to someone. They come in, they're upset. I think that it's driving the point that this is still going on, and they're not quite sure when they're going to be reunited, how long they're going to be in the system, and these are the questions that the administration is going to be confronting now.
Right, and let me just say, the images that we're looking at here from moments ago, and right now, the First Lady is meeting with children. Understandably, these are minors, and apparently the shelter rules are such that they don't want to have cameras in there, no matter who is in there, which is understandable. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, I agree. I think it is. I think the First Lady does deserve some credit for going down there, visiting these facilities, showing her face, and being there. But there are just so many questions, and the fact is, these kids are there without their parents. And unfortunately, I think that's not the image that they want to portray. Melania going there is not a substitute for a parent. I'm sure they would much rather be there with a parent. And I would be curious if those are the kind of questions that are going to be posed to the First Lady, and I'd be curious what her answer would be.
And just, I want to keep this discussion going for the next minute or so, but we are waiting for tape from the President, who is just wrapping up his cabinet meeting, where he actually announced the news that the First Lady is there, made it public. We obviously knew about it in private. Go ahead, Nia.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think this is a logistical nightmare for these kids. It's a horror. I mean, you can imagine being ripped from your parents at that age. I remember going off to kindergarten and being horrified that I was being separated from my mom for an afternoon. And you imagine that these kids are there. I mean, we'll see what the First Lady is prepared to do when she gets back. I do think she should be commended for going down there and bringing some information back to the President and bringing information about what's going on with those kids down at the border. But I think, as you said, more questions and more uncomfortable questions for this White House.